You know, this is one of those weapons that was actually hard to record for, because just look at this, okay? I spend all this time rounding up these enemies to show off the crit explosion, and then like 2 swings later, they're all gone. So I only got like 5 minutes of gameplay as of recording this. I might have to get more when I'm editing, but what I'm trying to say here is I killed the enemies too quickly, and when that happens, that's a good sign. The last weapon I ran into this issue with was a Xenon bow, and I think we all know how well that weapon turned out. However, let me limit your expectations a little bit, because the Argon axe it's not the Xenon bow. All right, let's settle down. But it was actually not until I immediately started recording that I realized I've already covered this weapon before. Now, the Argon axe got my attention because it has a base 30% crit chance. Let me show it right now in game. I've already shown the perks for it, but there are a lot of different ways to perk it with the new 6 perk. So this is the loadout I was running. I decided to go with Dennis Jr. in support because I figured we're using an axe and swing speed is pretty important here, and I am using a standard Paleoluna build. I do think totally rocking out would be a lot better here. It's always better for damage, but I like the roundness of Blast from the Past, and it keeps things consistent with all my videos. This is also why I'm using my 130 copy of Paleoluna, because I supercharged her for my own convenience, but I keep a 130 copy just for you guys, so all my videos are a little more consistent. But we also have anatomy lessons in this loadout, which is important because we need to take that off so we can demonstrate the fact that this weapon has a 30% crit chance. You'll note the lack of crit perks on here, and that is really one of the reasons why the Argon axe is one of the best crit explosion melees. Now, I have quite a few melees lined up here because I did pose an idea recently on my channel about melee week, and I'm not sure if I'm going to post all of these in a week or anything, but if you're watching this video brand new, then you might want to check out some of these following videos, and if you're watching this in the future, I'm going to do my best to link all these down below, but they should be pretty easy to find if you're looking for the any of these weapons over here, except for the pipe down, of course. This is a trash weapon, and I'm not going to cover it, but the Argon axe is an interesting addition to this because of, like I said, that really high base crit chance. Most weapons with a crit rating perk already go to about a 38%. That's for ranged weapons. Most melees have about a 15 to 20% chance to crit. So what I'm saying is, without a crit rating perk, you're already almost up to snuff with the other melees. But I went with double attack speed for my gameplay because I was using Paleoluna, and as some of you might know, the higher attack speed you have, the more useful she is. So let's talk about how I used to speak about this weapon and what was important then. Now, honestly, this is one of those weapons where there's a couple ways to go. Double attack speed is the highest DPS if you're running with Paleoluna. However, you might just want to throw a crit damage perk on there if you're not running Luna, just so that you can get some extra damage, because like I said, you're not going to need a crit rating perk. But having double attack speed with her is optimal, and there are a few 6 perk options. Back when I covered this weapon, Affliction and Slowed and Stared were essentially your only options, and Affliction is really strong. I don't have any gameplay of it with the Argon axe, but in the recent several updates, they have just left its damage as a nice peaked higher number than it used to be. It can also crit now, so Affliction is doing a ton of extra damage, and that is highly recommended on all the ranged weapons. But we're talking about melees today, where Crit Explosion is a really nice addition because it's only 43 base damage, which is like, I don't even know. You'll see the number in the gameplay, but it's a few tens of thousands of damage, and it's not a monumental number. But what happens here is something I've been explaining to myself recently, just trying to like articulate this video. There are weapons like the Spectral Blade, which has a really high DPS. This is one of the highest damage outputting melee weapons in the entire game. If you ignore the 6 perk of the Storm King's Ravager, it actually does have a higher DPS than the Ravager, but that's just specifically when the damage gets stacked up to 5 times, and again, we have to completely ignore the very powerful 6 perk on the Ravager. But what I'm saying is, the Spectral Blade does a ton of damage to a single target. Now, it does swing in an arc, so you can affect multiple enemies at once, but ironically, it actually does too much damage, and a lot of times you'll actually crit to do way more damage than one enemy needs to die, and with the Argon Axe, or with any weapon with the Crit Explosion, you get this effect where that explosion is not just hitting the enemy that you're attacking, like this Smasher kind of died pretty quickly, but also the fatties around him are also getting eliminated in a very timely manner, and that is one of those things where you spread that damage out against, multiple enemies at once, and you actually get a really interesting result. So mathematically, it's tough for me to calculate, exactly how the crits compare to the other weapons, because it scales pretty linearly with the amount of enemies that are standing by, because the weapon, you're hitting 3 extra enemies compared to 10 extra enemies? Well, if you've got 10 enemies in one explosion, the Argon Axe is going to have like a million DPS for a split second. And so it really depends on what you're working with, and that's why in a lot of my gameplay, I was crowding enemies together as best as possible, just so that I could show this thing to its maximum usefulness. Of course, if you're in a regular defense, you just attack an enemy as they come at you, and that's sort of a natural way to play. But if you are going to be playing with this weapon, let's get into more specifically how to perk it. Today, we're going to be talking about crit explosions. I'm going to ignore the other 6 perks. You can check out my old video. I don't even remember what I said in it. It was a long time ago. But I recall that video being fairly short and straight to the point, but there are a couple more ways to play. Obviously, energy is your only perk, so we're going to stick with that. And then the 5th perk is also something I can get out of the way right away. We're not running Affliction or Slowed and Snared, so you don't need that extra damage on here. And you might be stunning and staggering enemies, but I've never relied on this perk. And I honestly think that the damage to Mist Monsters was perfectly fine and something that I ran with and did not regret. Now, I did say Totally Rockin' Out is certainly preferred on this weapon, because Totally Rockin' Out would solve 2 main problems: attack speed and crit rating. I like to have health. That's why I record my videos of Blast from the Past. I explained that earlier. But if you guys were going to try this weapon out yourself, I might even suggest throwing on double crit damage and a Totally Rockin' Out build, because that'll up your crit chance a huge amount. You won't need a crit rating perk, obviously, because it's the Argon Axe. 30% is a nice starting point, I'll say. And of course, you'll have that faster attack swing that comes with the Totally Rockin' Out bonus. Now, I was using Dennis Jr., so I did get a little bit of attack speed in my gameplay, but that's just a recommendation of how to play. If you're using Luna, use double attack speed. I think that's the best way to go. And this middle perk is up to you guys. I don't think the heavy attack is useful at all on the Argon Axe. I didn't use it at all in my gameplay. I think damage is the only rational way to go here. Life Leech is kind of good. Movement speed, if you really don't care about damage, can be nice, but I don't really think that's necessary during a fight. And if you are using Totally Rockin' Out, I might even consider armor, just because that'll keep you alive for longer and could, help you keep that health up a little bit. But that's complete preference. I prefer damage, and I think that's the way to go. And then, of course, there are the other ways to play, where if this weapon could have attack speed in the middle perk, I'd highly recommend crit rating crit damage, but you can't do that. Like, a crit rating perk on this goes so far. 58% chance to crit is ludicrous, but that attack speed does slow down a little bit, and you will feel it. So I can't recommend doing that as much as I want to. Even though this is a crit explosion weapon, I honestly did feel like swinging faster was better than critting more often. Your mileage may vary. Hey, if you see this perk loadout and you think, you know what, 2 attack speed does seem a little overkill. Beast says it's mathematically better with Luna, but like I also said in this video, the Spectral Blade is mathematically stronger, but can also have worse crowd clearing. So it kind of depends. You might want to try attack speed crit rating and have a more than 58%. Actually, let's see, it's 58% chance without my loadout. Let's go ahead and throw that back on and just see where that goes. I personally don't even know. I didn't check it before this video. Yeah, 65.5% chance to crit. That'll that'll do it, I think. That's more than every shot. So essentially 6.5 out of 10 of your swings are going to crit, which, rounding up, because integers are a thing that matters in the real world, because a little math lesson for everybody. Yeah, let's everybody grab a seat. So you can't hit for 0.5%, meaning like either you hit the enemy and you crit, or you hit the enemy and you don't. So we use the term integer because you can't hit 6.5 out of 10 enemies. It's either 7 or 6. So a 65.5% chance to crit is essentially 66 out of 100 enemies, because you can't half a crit. That's not a thing that exists right now. So yeah, that is definitely a lot of chances. I am going to go back to attack speed here, where it's just under 50%. I feel like that's an important threshold. To crit more than half of the time is important when you're trying to activate these explosions, but that depends on your playstyle, and the way you want to perk it is totally up to you. However, I have talked through all the options, so I'm going to let you guys go. If you guys want to support the channel, feel free to use, code Mista to check out. I really do appreciate it. It helps me make more of these. Comment down below. I will take the highest thumbed up comment for a crit explosion melee that I have not covered before, and we'll do that one next. Thank you guys so much for watching, and have a nice day. And then...